Welcome to Let's Talk About It. I'm Tamara,
And I'm Sheena.
and today we're talking about how to teach kids to have happy relationships.
Well, that's a great skill to have. Frankly, I was never taught that.
No, neither was I, and I don't think it's something that's generally taught. People are left to muddle along and figure it out for themselves.
Which leads to disaster. I think people have higher divorce rates now than ever before.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, when children are little, we teach them how to be friends. We teach them how to share with others. We teach them how to be good with others. We also teach them how to stay away from sexual predators. And then when they're teenagers, there's more sex talk on, how to have sex. Well, not how to have sex, but they probably should have
Safe
that.
sex,
Safe sex, that kind of a
how
thing.
babies are created.
Yes, but the emotional side of it, the romantic side of it, is never actually delved into.
If you think about it, right, you spend most of your adult life in some form of relationship, even if it's not a romantic relationship. You have to be friends with people, you have relationships with family members, and you are never taught these skills.
Yeah, even relationships with your own children. So, I mean, there's a lot of aspects of relationships which you're just not taught. And I think you're left to figure it out from those people around you, your parents, other caregivers.
But if they don't have healthy relationships, then you're modeling your relationships off the unhealthy relationships.
Exactly. Or even if they do, I mean, they can be married for 50 years and you could end up getting divorced 5 times. It doesn't necessarily correlate.
It's true.
Okay. Because being in a relationship is a skill, as we've discovered.
Absolutely. I mean, if the series has done nothing else, it's shown you that.
Yes. Okay. So, Harvard psychologist Richard Weissman conducted a survey on kids, and I feel old about this, between 18 to 25 years old.
You're ancient.
Young adults.
Okay.
And he found that 70% of them wanted to be taught or for their parents to talk to them about romantic sides of relationships.
Okay.
And then a further 65% wanted to learn about the emotional aspects of relationships.
So kids actually want to know this stuff.
They actually do. And they feel like there's so much information put out there about sex, but nothing about being in a relationship. And
Well, if you think about it, your first relationship, you have all these questions. What is okay? What am I expected to do in this relationship? How should I behave?
yeah. And I mean, all of this leads to a lot of dysfunctional behavior if it isn't addressed. I mean, there's huge problems with teenagers when it comes to sex. There's a lot of sexual harassment of girls or boys, I suppose, even. There's a lot of girls feeling like they have to have sex or do other sex acts to be liked. And I mean, all of that is part of not knowing how to be in a relationship.
Because if you're only taught that relationships are about sex,
Yes.
and you're not having sex, then how can you
If
be in a
romance
relationship?
equals
Right.
sex, if you're not having it, you're not showing the other person that you love them, you're not showing them that you're in a romantic relationship, and a whole lot of F stuff.
Okay.
Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing is the most obvious is to define, model, and give examples of healthy relationships. Now, this means that you as a parent have to be in a healthy relationship. And a lot of this season has spoken about that. Okay, so it's not just telling your child to look for XYZ, it's actually showing them what that looks like.
Okay, so let's go back a couple of episodes and let's talk about a love language, for example, right? So you and I, we discovered, have different love languages
Yes.
when we did the test. Your love language is you like to be touched.
Yes.
So not in necessarily a sexual way, but like you like it when I hold your hand or when I give you caresses I pass you in the
Yes,
hall
or even if
a
we're
hug.
just sitting next to each other, if we're like slightly touching, for me, that's very.
So that makes you feel like I love you.
Yes.
And it makes you feel like you're cherished. And it sort of fills up your love tank.
Exactly.
Right? For me, my love language is acts of
Service.
Thank you. I couldn't remember. I was like, acts of desperation. No, that's not right. Coffee is desperation. So, acts of service.
Yes.
So for me, I take note if you do the dishes, or if you do my laundry for me, or if you do something that I consider a chore and you do it for me specifically, if that makes sense. So that makes my love tank feel like it's been filled up.
Yeah.
Here's the catch though, right, with this. everybody seems to have different love languages, and you don't necessarily know what the other person's love language is, and it can be very confusing.
But I think, part of this is teaching your child through your own actions how to take note of other people and
Yes.
because I mean, a lot of it is observation and actually taking the time to discover the other person and what they like.
Imagine if your child understood about the 5 love languages
Mm.
and understood what was happening when you went and made me a cup of coffee, when I was holding your hand or giving you a hug.
Yes, that's a huge thing. So,
Then they become aware that this exists. Okay?
completely. The next thing that you would teach a child is you explain what an unhealthy relationship is and how to identify it. A problem is with a lot of people and they don't have successful relationships is because the relationships themselves are unhealthy. Okay, so an unhealthy relationship is one that has an imbalance where one partner tries to exercise control and power over the other one through threats, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and it can include name calling, insults, it can include gaslighting, it can include actually hitting or whatever it is, but teaching your child what is and what isn't okay. And more importantly, with an unhealthy relationship, you can actually model this with friends as well. It does not just have to be a romantic relationship. So, if your child has a friend in their circle who does any of these manipulation tactics, or they're continuously putting them down or calling their names, you can show already in that situation that this is a form of unhealthy relationship, so that they know how to identify it, but they also have the ability to then, when they are in a romantic relationship, to get out of it because they know that it is unhealthy and that's not the way they should be treated.
That's interesting. I have witnessed teenagers where one will say something nasty to the other, but in this kind of jesty way, right?
Yes.
So, oh, you're such a idiot.
Yes.
Ha 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 ha, right? This comes down to EQ, though.
Yes.
Ultimately, it comes down to if you have high emotional intelligence, you can see this coming.
No, exactly.
You can understand this.
Yes, but I mean, if you don't or you aren't taught to actually trust your instincts on these kinds of a thing because, oh, that's fine, he's my boyfriend or she's my girlfriend, whatever it is, and so it's okay.
It's a form of love. It's not a form of love.
No. So if you're in a relationship where you feel judged, you feel shamed, you feel continuously discouraged, you feel depressed, that is not a safe and happy relationship.
If you don't feel good being in that relationship, that is not a good
Yeah.
relationship.
And the thing is, even good relationships have bad times,
Yes.
but you will never feel
awful
awful.
about being in the relationship.
Yes.
You might feel awful in that moment because you just feel upset, angry, despondent, whatever it is, but you don't feel like miserable about being in the relationship.
Yeah, so I mean, an example would be you feel ashamed because you like wearing red lipstick, for example, and your girlfriend or boyfriend keeps making fun of you or calls you a slut when you wear red lipstick. That is a dangerous relationship.
Yes.
That's just an example, but
Yes.
yeah, okay.
So do you think what you need to do then is have discussions with your kids about the relationships in their lives that are important and what happened at school and that kind of thing? How do you encourage teenagers to open up to you about this sort of thing though?
Well, I think it's also trying to have that dialogue and relationship with your teenager where you can do that, right? So that they are open enough to talk to you. But I think maybe even talking about your own past relationships or trying to show them what is not okay behavior. I mean, from when they're small. I mean, it doesn't have to be when they're just a teenager. But if you've been doing this their whole lives, hopefully they're able to realize it when they're in a relationship.
So this can start, when you're teaching kids that thing where they draw the happy face, the sad face, the whatever it is, that's teaching kids to recognize emotion in expressions. So at that point already, you can start improving their EQ and their ability to understand their own feelings and to handle their own feelings and to understand other people and their relationship.
I mean, it can even be as simple as, and I'm sure we've all had it, the kid in school who bites you or who is continually nasty. And what is the solution? Oh, make friends, be nice. If at that point you get taught, actually, that is not okay behavior, and we do not want that child as a friend because they are being bullies, or that is not a healthy way to behave towards other people.
It's true, because then, especially for girls, it stops excusing bad behavior. It stops making you feel like it's your job to bridge that gap.
Yeah. I mean, it's not okay for, like, growing up in the time that I did, like, if a boy makes fun of you, it's because he likes you.
Right.
I
Yes.
mean,
He was just being an asshole.
exactly. And, that can be for anyone. Like,
But you're also teaching boys then it's okay to be assholes to girls because you don't know how to deal with your own feelings.
yeah, it doesn't serve anyone.
No.
So teaching children at those times that it's not okay behavior, it's okay to feel bad about this because you shouldn't be treated this way.
Okay, here's the rub though.
Yes.
This is all grand and dandy, but if you don't understand how to deal with these feelings yourself, if you don't have a high EQ yourself, you're going to struggle with this.
Oh, sure, but if you don't have an high EQ, you're probably not even going to go do this exercise.
Well, that's true. But there's so many resources and so much help out there that you can find the answer to these things, right?
No, you can. Look, we've done podcasts on how to identify what your EQ sort of level is and how to improve it.
Yeah.
But the thing is with EQ is you have to want to go and improve it.
Yeah.
Okay.
With any of this.
Yeah. But the thing is, when you have a child, you're supposed to be a guide to them. And before they even know what an EQ is, they already have a pretty okay one. It's as they grow up, like, kind of isn't as fantastic.
It's true. It's true. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like teaching them and guiding them to actually trust those instincts and to make sure that EQ stays at a healthy level.
And not to excuse bad behavior. I like this. Okay, what's next?
Okay, the next is communication. We know how important communication is to a relationship, right?
Just the last episode, we were talking about how the gender roles in relationships seem fairer in homosexual relationships rather than heterosexual relationships just because of the communication.
Yes. So teaching children to communicate effectively is important. This is going to vary from family to family, but teaching kids to communicate effectively from when they're little. So if they're not feeling great about something, how do they communicate that in words, and how do they explain it to you, and how do you come to a solution together?
Ripping your kid out of the supermarket when they're having a tantrum is not the way to do this.
No.
It's not like, okay, sure, kids have tantrums, but they have tantrums because they don't know how to communicate how they're feeling.
Yes, so, it might be easier, it might be the least embarrassing option in the moment, but working with them to show them how to communicate their feelings helps.
I think a big part of that, though, is also listening. So if they do communicate their feelings, if you are paying attention and listening and understanding, I've seen kids where parents, and I understand, and I'm not judging, okay, parents get exhausted, I get it. But I've seen times when kids are trying to talk to their parents and their parent just is not paying any attention to them at all.
Yes. So, yes, I mean, communication is a two-way street.
Yeah.
You can't expect a child to communicate to you, but you're not to communicate with a child. You need to treat them as a fully formed human being, not necessarily as an adult, because they're not adults and they shouldn't be taking on adult issues and problems, but you should be communicating to them in a way that is mature.
Right, because that's how they learn to do it too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
The next step is teaching them to love themselves and to know themselves.
I like that.
Okay. So we've spoken about this in a previous podcast about becoming a whole person. And most of us had to get into our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, to learn about ourselves. How great would it be if we were a little bit ahead of the game, if we were taught to know who we are from when we were kids?
Be amazing. Your whole life would be different.
So, I mean, this is letting kids explore their interests. It's letting them feel what they feel and letting them be who they think they are, whether that's something you understand as a parent or not. So for those of us who have children who are queer, or who, if we're queer, they're straight, or whatever it is, letting children experience their lives and supporting them in it and letting them be okay with that.
Okay. But you have to, I mean, being a parent is probably one of the hardest things because you have to juggle the whole thing of letting them explore stuff with boundaries. So, for example, this week your kid might want to try karate, next week it might be ballet, and the week after that it might be fencing. and you just don't have the money for all
Oh,
the
sure.
kits and that
Of
kind
course,
of thing.
of course. I mean, within reason. But this is where communication comes in, and it's like, okay, I understand that you want to do this, but this is the reality. And how do we go ahead and do this? Do you know what I mean? And I know it's easier said than done, but
It's not impossible though. When I was a kid, we were like really poor. Like so poor that we couldn't afford to buy me jeans. For example, we bought me like cheaper pants.
yes.
Okay. And I remember understanding that we didn't have the money to go and buy brand new stuff. And it wasn't a hardship for me, but because my parents explained it to me, I understood it.
Yeah. But I mean, it can be as general as you have a son and your son is interested in fashion, letting him explore that, whatever, however that might be. You don't have to go buy him a sewing machine and a professional, I don't know, design kit and fancy tablet to draw on. You don't have to go that far, but you can support it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and why it's important that kids know themselves and love themselves before they enter a relationship, because if you get into a relationship that's unhealthy, you are confident enough in who you are and knowing what you want to know that this is an unhealthy relationship. So, for example, with a lot of girls, there's an expectation, or people talk about weight. And if a girl knows enough that actually my weight is not your issue, they know that this is an unhealthy relationship. Or a girl who is very athletic and yet someone comments on how
small her boobs are.
Yes, or even that she's gained weight. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. The self-love and knowing yourself will see you through the hard times and allow you to form the healthy relationships that you want in your life.
Yeah. I mean, and if you get into a relationship where someone says that you're bad at something, whether it's like drawing or whatever it is, or underestimates your abilities, but you've been brought up to know that you're a very capable person and that anything you do, and I'm not saying to give everyone participation trophies or to genuinely support and help someone grow in an area, but so that they're confident in themselves when they're in a relationship.
It's so funny. Like, I get people who try to discredit the lesbian review, right? And they say things like, "Oh, we're anti-trans and we're this and that and whatever it is." But because I know that this is complete rubbish, I don't even pay them a mind. Other people get upset on my behalf, which is actually very funny. I just don't even, like, it's just water off a duck's back because I know it's complete rubbish.
Yes.
And this is exactly it.
Yes. Another issue that you spoke about briefly is helping them to define boundaries.
So important.
Yeah. So it's something that every kid needs to know how to do and every adult needs to know how to do. So whether it's setting up sexual boundaries, so hey, I'm 16 and I'm not ready for that, if that's the case, or actually, no, I don't want to be out at this party until midnight, whatever it is. Like, if your kid is able to set out the boundaries for their relationships, whether they're a teenager or in their 20s, it's going to serve them well.
Absolutely, especially girls. Especially girls.
Mm-hmm.
Boys are not raised to have as many problems saying no as girls.
This and the previous point, it's very important in terms of, keeping your sense of self. Because I think sometimes people get into relationships and they lose who they are as an individual. And if you know who you are and you're able to set boundaries, I think you're able to keep that more easily.
I agree with you. What's the next point?
Okay, the next point is something that's relevant today, is digital abuse. So it's teaching kids to deal with the inevitable, so like cyberbullying, being sexually harassed online, all of that, so how do you deal with it?
I have a simple rule of thumb. You don't engage with cyber harassers, you block them, because every single platform has blocking capabilities.
Yeah, but it's teaching kids to like how to deal with the pressure,
It's
how
true.
to deal with the bullies, how to, if someone wants something sexual of you online, and that something sexual online is just as bad as something sexual in the real world.
Cyberbullies are also particularly good at kind of gaslighting you.
Yes.
And so understanding when that's happening and when a comment goes from being constructive criticism to when it goes to being complete bullshit.
And teaching them to be open with the parent about what's going on in their online lives, because it's so easy for it to become this secret little cesspool.
It's true.
So, being able to keep some sort of eye, not in a prying way, but just to make sure that they're safe is important.
Trust, I think, with the parents is very important in this particular thing. Unfortunately, we're seeing a rise in teenage and children suicides because of cyberbullying. And you're right, that's absolutely something that has to be top of mind.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people nowadays also start off relationships online, and they do go offline sometimes. But if you are involved in an online relationship, it can be quite dangerous, because firstly, you don't even know if the person you're speaking to is who they say they are. There are a lot of predators out there. It's something you need to think of. Also, there could be some sort of weird imbalance of power. And when it comes to girls, specifically when they're in hetero relationships, there's a lot of sexual manipulation where girls are asked to send photos, videos, and, teaching girls that actually they shouldn't do this, because revenge porn is something real.
Oh, completely.
So
we've seen it with movie stars and stuff.
Yes.
Even Rachel Woods is one of the more recent examples, and it's just horrifying.
No, it's horrifying. And I mean, you put yourself in this vulnerable position with someone who you trust, and this is how you get treated. And I mean, offline it's one thing, but now with the internet, it's,
completely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last thing is teaching your child how to ask for help. Okay, so in a case where their relationship is not good, teaching them how to get help from someone else, how to get out.
I think that's super important, because sometimes you feel completely trapped in that space and you feel like there's no way that you can come out, especially if you're in an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It takes monumental effort to get out.
It does. So, teaching kids about helplines that could possibly help you, teaching them about things like sexual health clinics, that kind of thing, if they need it, teaching them that they can come to you as a parent. You know what I mean? Setting up a support structure that supports them through their life, not just, the things that are easy to support them.
So basically, you have to teach your children all the skills you wish you had right from the start.
Pretty much. Well, that's the thing. I mean, we're all trying the best we can do, and let's get real, most grown-ups don't have it together.
Not a
They're
chance.
trying to learn how to deal with life as it is. But when you bring children into the equation, you need to, you're trying to still, figure out your own life, but now you've got this other person to think of. And I think if, you're taking parenting seriously, you should be trying to help them, even though you didn't have that. I mean, we see it with parents all the time. They try to get their children better education, have better access to things that they didn't have as children. So why not in this realm as well?
And this is not something common, and it's not something easy, but it's definitely possible.
Completely.
Well, I'll give you a personal example. My mother had a terrible relationship with my father.
Mm-hmm.
My father is not a good guy, but she got out of it. And she tried her best to teach me to have better relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And because I saw my grandparents have a really great relationship, they very purposefully, because they saw their parents fighting all the time, never fought in front of the kids. So as far as I was concerned, I grew up with this peaceful home where there was never any fighting or any of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I've evolved into a person who can have a healthier relationship than what my mother could, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's a lot about modeling, but imagine if we had the understanding and skills that we have now, and then passing it on to the next generation, they'll have an even better chance.
Yes.
I like this. This is a good plan.
It's a great plan. No, just to get it done.
I think that's all for this week.
Okay, so thanks for listening. Let us know your tips on how you help your children grow up.
What did you do? What was important for you as a parent?
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear it.
Yes, and you can let us know on the Lesbian Talk Show chat group on Facebook.
Or email us on podcast@thelesbiantalkshow.com.
Mm-hmm. You can also share this podcast with your friends' children.
And if you like this podcast and you want exclusive content, which we do for patrons, join up, be a patron, help us grow. It's all a good thing. Get exclusive content.
You can do that on patreon.com/The Lesbian Talk Show.
Yeah, that's it. And rate us on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, it helps other people find us.
That's all for this week. Bye.